Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. The objective of today's call is to discuss the generator model data requirements updates. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm also joined by a few other ISO representatives here in the room, so I'll have them introduce themselves, starting to my left.
Frank Chen,
Ibrahim Rahimi,
Rithi Ray,
Hongzhe Zhu. Today's call is being recorded, and the video file will be available on the miscellaneous stakeholder webpage for a limited time. The recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. The presentation we will be going over today is also available on the miscellaneous stakeholder webpage. We will be taking questions throughout the call today. You can enter the question queue at any time by pressing #2 on your telephone keypad. Just a quick reminder before we get started to please introduce yourself before asking your questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Rithi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the generator modeling webinar. We'll be going through quite a few topics today. I know we have 3 hours allocated, so hopefully that is sufficient time not only for us to present our requirements and processes to you, but also to respond to any questions you have. And we can continue taking questions as we proceed through the webinar. We don't have to wait till the end. Just to give a quick overview of the topics we will cover today, we will do an overview of Section 10 of the BPM for transmission planning process. It is the BPM that sets all the requirements for this program. We will also just highlight a recent update that was made to this Section 10, which was under PRR 1207. That's designation given to this update under our BPM change management process. We will explain the generator category list and how that is set up. After that, we'll spend some time going over the generator data template, which is the core of the data submission requirements that you have. So we will have Hongzhe Zhu present on that. Following that, we have a few slides dedicated to electromagnetic transient model submissions. We have had a lot of questions from generators on this topic lately, so we have posted a couple of documents to 8 generators and submitting on this data on this topic, so we will spend some time just discussing those requirements and what we are expecting to see from you. After that, we'll go through what we are terming quality deficiencies, and we'll just explain what we actually mean by that when we provide that information in our responses to you after completing the review of your submitted information. After that, we'll go through some administrative items such as how does the submission process work, what we expect to see from you in your emails when you actually submit the data to us. This really helps us track this data better, given that the ISO and all the participating transmission owners are dealing with close to 1,000 resources under this program. And we have also posted a number of links associated with this program at the end. So with that, we'll jump into the first slide. The Business Practice Manual for Transmission Planning Process, it covers all the different requirements under our transmission planning process, including the topic we're going to discuss today, which is generator modeling requirements. These requirements were set up as a separate section, a new section under this BPM effective August 1st, 2018. It highlights the different submission requirements from the generators, such as completing the data templates we provide, sending us up-to-date testing reports which cover requirements set under NERC reliability standards, MOD 25, 26, and 27. It also highlights the requirements for Emt module submissions, single line diagrams, and any other associated data that helps us complete this review and update our planning and operational base cases. We do highlight the administrative process to be used for submitting this data in this BPM. The primary responsibility for submitting the data is that of the generator owner, which we call or know as the participating generator. this responsibility or obligation is set under the participating generator agreement, because that is what really links your generator obligations to the ISO tariff. If you have any questions on the process, feel free to ask, but I'll continue with this slide for now. We recently submitted and made effective PRR 1207, which deals with the submission of electromagnetic transient models in the PSCAT format. This new section or update was actually included as a result of issues that were brought up by generator owners, namely dealing with the timely submission of EMT models. Their concerns were highlighted to us, and we decided that it would be beneficial for everyone if we could set up a process for generator owners to ask for extensions to their submission deadlines for the EMT models after they have demonstrated the need for such a deadline, and the process for that is listed out in the section 10 of this BPM. We will now jump into the meat of this presentation. As I mentioned before, the core of the requirements is really covered under the generator data template. It identifies all your submission requirements under the introduction tab, but then it has an equipment data tab which allows you to input number of machine data and parameters in there. Plus, it also has a validation tab, which then allows you to check, do a self-check on whether you have met all the requirements that we have provided you. The validation tab is also used by the ISO engineers and the PTO engineers to review your submissions, as well as identify any deficiencies that we have discovered. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sonze Zhu, and we will do a walkthrough of the data template.
Okay, I'll delve into the details of the generator data. So this is a spreadsheet you need to fill out, but actually when we send this spreadsheet to you, we will pre-populate the information for you as much as we can. So the purpose of that is to make it easier for you. Just if we already have the information, you just need to confirm. If we don't have the information, then you fill out the missing information. So we try to minimize work for you and also have consistent submission from you. So there are 4 tabs. The first one, instruction list, please do read this tab. So it is there meant to help you. So it explains the different tabs, what are there, and what you need to do on each tab. Also explains some like the color of different cells. So this is very useful to spend a couple of minutes, go over this content. It will make the rest of the work easier. Okay, then the introduction tab, that's the kind of the summary of the data requirements for this resource. When we send this request, we will pre-populate the information here, the resource ID. So what we are asking is for you to enter information for this resource. So this part, mostly we should know the information. So it should always be filled out except for the last reactive capability test date and last dynamic model test date. If we have never received a test report from you, then we won't be able to fill out those 2. Otherwise, the rest of the cells here should be filled out the form. Then down here, that's a summary of the data submission requirement. We will put, if we already have data, want you to confirm, then we'll put data on file here. And you will see the corresponding data, if it's maybe contained in this spreadsheet, or if it might be a separate file attached to the request. Then if we don't have the data, then it will be either yes or no. Yes means you must submit it. No means it's not required. So depending on the category of the resource, some of the data item may not be required for some of the resources. For example, the electromagnetic transient model. This is only required for generator close to field compensated transmission line. So we will pre-populate yes or no, because yes, you must submit. If no, you don't have to worry about that, at least for now. Then the majority of the data should be entered on the equipment data tab. So this is designed for all kinds of generators. So there are only certain sections applicable to your particular resource depending on the technology. So first, fill out the general information regarding the megawatt for the resource. That's section 1. There's the MVA specificity rating. So actually the MVA rating, you don't need to enter it here. Notice this cell is gray, so that means it's a calculated cell. And the actual MVA for the plant is calculated based on the MVA rate you are going to enter in section 2 for each individual generator. So we will sum them up here for you, so you don't need to enter. But the white cells you must enter. The first one is the maximum output generating facility gross output. So this is the total output at the terminal you intend to produce in order to achieve the megawatt at the POI in your contract. So if depending on the technology, like the solar plant, those inverter-based power plants, they typically oversize the inverters. So do pay attention to this one. Don't enter the total rated megawatt. This is the total output you should produce to achieve the megawatt at POI. So here there is some math we should match up. So this is the output at the terminal. Then you enter the aux load. Then we will calculate the net megawatt at the terminal as the gross minus aux. Then you should test your power flow model, so you should know the anticipated losses between the generating unit and the POI. Enter the losses here, and then we will calculate the net megawatt at the POI. So after you complete this sheet, this number calculated from the numbers you entered should match what's in your GIA as a megawatt at POI. Make sure they do match. Then there's some additional data, minimum gross output, that's like PMIN. And if it's a combined cycle, then specify the plant net output capacity for if the steam turbine is out. So that's the overall plant megawatt information. Then after that, you will enter individual generator information. So here, unit 1 through 9, it doesn't have to match exactly the physics unit. If you have 2 identical units, you can enter that only once. Just indicate the number of units is 2. So you don't have to repeat the same information multiple times. Okay, so this is basically unit 1 to 9 are based on the type of unit. So for each unit, you select, so the green shaded cells, there is an option box associated with that, so you can select one of those. Induction synchronous generator, DC with inverter, or WSAT, so this is for type 3 wind. Select the technology and the type. This is a long list. For example, it's a ST, it's a combined cycle steam turbine. So based on your technology, you select the applicable type of the turbine, basically. If it's a PV solar, then you select 31. If it's battery, then there's 42. And then for wind, there are type 1, 2, 3, 4, each has its own type. So 21 through 24. Then those information, manufacturing information, so those are all existing plants. You should know your manufacturer, the model name, model number, model name and model number. If it's not applicable, enter one of them. It's fine. Then year, manufactured, then the number of individual generators or inverters, put it here. Then for each individual generator or inverter, enter the nominal terminal voltage, the MVA rating, megawatt rating, and this cell, the next cell, power factor is a calculated value. It's really just meant for information based on your MVA and the rating in megawatt. What is the power factor for this combination of megawatt and MVA? Here the MVA and the megawatt, you can just enter the rating number directly from that your manufacturer sheet. It doesn't have to match your capability test report. It's a design. The design data is a reference point for us. As long as we are going to review all the information you provide. This information, the capability test report, and your power flow model. Make sure that your Qmax, Qmin in the power flow model can be supported by the both manufacturer data and your test report. So all all from manufacturer data sheet. Select the phase, the connection, and then we ask for primary frequency response characteristic. Tell us what's the upward droop, the downward droop, and the step band. Reactive power control mode, you can select one of those. Those actually meant for the inverter-based generator. For all the synchronous generator, it should be voltage control. So you can just select the second one, voltage control mode. Then the remaining sections actually depend on your technology. So we put here, skip this section if it does not have a synchronous generator. If it's a synchronous generator or one of the units is synchronous generator, then you should fill out this section. The data here is quite simplified from what you probably are used to, the interconnection request. We're not asking you to fill out all the parameters on this spreadsheet. Just tell us what type of exciter, governor you use, and what's the model name for that. So it should be straightforward. So first, for the generator part, tell us, we can select from one of those, what's the dynamic model you will provide to us. For synchronous generator, the most common one right now is Gen type J. Then for exciter, manufacturer, then what type of exciter it is. Again, it is a select box, and the problem is it's kind of very long, the selection. Also, maybe I'll add probably, what's the best way to see? Probably the best way is to select each one, and then if it's not the right one, select the next one. It's too long, it doesn't fit very well to that box. Then the dynamic model name, there are quite a bit of exciter models. You select the one you're going to submit us. Then there are some protection for the excitation, over-excitation limiter and under-excitation limiter. So for over-excitation limit, if you do have, and I believe for all the synchronous generator, they should have, just select OEL1, that's the only model available. For under-excitation, currently GE doesn't have an implementation of that. So just submit, so that's why we have here is yes or no instead of the model name. Just say yes or no. If it's yes, please provide the setting. Actually, GE is developing the model, so it will be available soon. For the PSS, Power System Stabilizer, again, enter the manufacturer, then select the model name. Then for governor, the turbine type, select one of those, and enter the manufacturer, then select the model name. Then for next subsection for synchronous generators, shortage data. So enter the subpresent reactance here. X double prime 1, both saturated and unsaturated negative sequence and zero sequence, and provide the MVA base. If it's grounded, provide the grounding information here. Regarding protection, if you do have if you enable your under-over frequency relay, then select yes here. If you enable the under-over voltage relay, then select yes here, and out-of-step relay. So if you select yes, then you should submit a model for that. If it's no, then you don't need a model for that. Also, we ask your self-evaluation whether your under-over frequency relay settings are compliant with PRC 24. If no, tell us why. Again, same thing on the under-over voltage relay settings. Tell us your self-evaluation and if there's some physical limitation that prevents you from meeting the requirements, tell us that. And the next section is for induction generator, so mostly it is for type 1, 2, and 3 wind turbine. If it's a type 4, don't enter any information here, go to the inverter-based generator. So again, the generator model select either 1G, 2G, turbine type, type 1 or type 2, then if it's type 1, then select the pitch control model. If it's type 2, select the control model. If you don't use if you use some additional model, there shouldn't be, but in case, just specify what you use. Then short circuit duty data quite simple. Tell us when the max current occurs and how much is that current. Then on the protection, on the frequency relay and the voltage relay, same questions to be answered as synchronous generator regarding PRC 24 compliance. So inverter-based generator, so those are for solar PV, battery, also type 3 and type 4 wind turbines. First subsection is on the short circuit current. So there are 5 parameters you are going to enter for each type of inverter you use. So that's the maximum current during fault and the duration of that current. Basically, that's when that maximum current happens. Then the max current after fault detection and max current low voltage through. I think those are probably. Have we sent out the?
We can talk about it.
Yeah, I think those are outdated. We should have changed this. Those are current. Yeah. Yeah, those definition of the fault current was kind of out of date. We have adopted the IEC standard and have a different set of data we ask. And that is probably easier for the generator to provide because the manufacturer provide those data directly. So we will say we should change those. And then on the dynamic model, so for solar resources, if it's a PV and DG distribution generator, then use either PVP1 or DERA model. Otherwise, the transmission connected. Then here are the models you need to include. So first is generator model. right now only REGC_A is available. And then the electrical control model, so it will be either A or C. So we have removed REC_B. REC_B has retired. It's no longer accepted by the ISO, our PTOs. So if it's wind, solar, use A. If it's a battery, C. Actually, even for solar, you can use C. C is just flexible that it can have negative output. If you have positive output, even for solar, use C is fine. Then plant controller, there's A and a B right now available. If you have multiple.
Can we just stop and make a couple of clarifications?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there was a question regarding what to do if you don't know an answer to a data cell. If you do not know what to put in there and you have to leave it blank, definitely put an explanation note in the validation tab as to why you left it blank. Having an incomplete submission is a deficiency, but if there is maybe a technical limitation to why you cannot include a value in a data cell, then both the ISO and the PTO needs to know that. So definitely include it under the comments in the validation tabs. Don't just leave it blank without explaining why. And yes, I hope that explains that. And the other thing, Sonzu, if we're changing have changed the definition of the fault current contribution, right?
So the pre-populated data sheet is will change there. So when they receive the data sheet, it's the new parameters.
We
are not going to pre-populate those because we usually don't save those values.
Do we want generators that still are pending submission?
It's okay. So because we also ask the manufacturer documentation on the chassis, so usually that is more useful. And this format is fine. It's just for the generator might be harder for them. They don't really understand what those parameters are. The new form, the parameters explained in the IEC standard, it's easier for them to find the reference.
So for all the future requests that are going out, we will look to updating the format for these parameters.
Yeah, so before we send them out, we will change those parameters to the up-to-date.
Okay.
Yeah, so here on the REPC model, I want to emphasize that REPC_B is preferred if you model multiple equivalent generators for the same plant and the voltage control is coordinated among those units. So REPC_B has the capability to control multiple devices. It's better than the A because we have seen in the simulation when there are multiple generators in the same plant, they fight each other on the voltage control, and it doesn't impact the overall system performance, but it just affects how the generators behaving inside the plant. But if you do use REPC_B, please be aware that REPC_B, all the parameters are based on system and VA base. It cannot be, there's no option for you to use the machine and VA base. So you have to convert all the parameters, otherwise the simulation is wrong. Then for type 3 or 4 wind turbine, additional models are needed, as the drivetrain model, the aerodynamic model, pitch control model, and torque control model. So there are actually only one model available, so you have to submit that particular model. Then regarding protection, again, answer yes or no to the frequency relay and the voltage relay, and also answer the questions regarding the PRC 24 compliance. The next question for the inverters is whether the inverter use momentary cessation. So select yes or no. please be aware momentary cessation means the inverter stops gating during low voltage or high voltage event. So both active and reactive current are zero. That is momentary cessation. If your inverters still provide reactive current for low voltage, do not select yes. So we have seen many people submit inconsistent data here, yes, but then their model shows they still produce reactive current. That is not momentary cessation. Answer no here. So if it does do momentary cessation, we need to know about some characteristics. What's the low voltage threshold for the inverters to get into momentary cessation, and what is the high voltage threshold? And when the voltage event is over, is there a time delay before the inverter continue injecting current? Also, when it's going back to normal operation, what's the ramp rate for the active current? Also, when you provide that ramp rate, because it's in per unit, tell us what's the MVA base for that per unit value. So that's the generator information. Next section is on the plant voltage active capability information. So different generators or different plants have different reactive capability requirement. It has been changing over the time. So here we didn't provide that requirement because it varies. But we will collect information from you, and we will use those information to check against the requirement that is applicable to your generators. So this reactive capability requirement is at the plant level. So there are multiple reactive sources. First is the generator. So you tell us, so this is a total number. So if you have multiple generators, enter the sum of the Qmax and Qmin from individual generators. Also, we want to know when you enter those numbers, what's the temperature you assumed. And this is also clarification is this Qmax, Qmin are the Qmax and Qmin at the output that you will produce at the terminal to achieve the megawatt at POI. Then if you have additional reactive devices, provide information here. Select what type of device it is. It's a fixed cap, fixed reactor, SVD, SVC, or even STATCOM. If it's not one of those, then you tell us what it is. It's a static, and put a description here. But if it's one of those, you don't have to enter these two cells, the other cells. And tell us the capacity, Qmax and Qmin, and the location, like at 34.5 kV bus, or it is at the terminal, or it's at the high side of the substation transformer. Here, provide a general description of the voltage power factor control. So it basically tells us how you operate your plant. So for example, if it's the solar PV, and you tell us on the normal condition, you operate on the constant power factor mode. Then if the voltage is below 0.9, for example, then the inverter control take over. It is the voltage regulation. Also, like you have a power plant controller. That controller will first switch in and out capacitor banks. It will maybe does it adjust the transformer type changes, and also it coordinate the generator Q output. So put as much information as you can here, so those help us to understand your dynamic model, help us to evaluate whether your plant is meeting all the performance requirements. Okay, question?
So it looks like we have some questions in the queue. So Joshua, could you open up the line for the first caller?
Yes, I'm unmuting the line now. Caller, please go ahead and state your question for us.
Hello, yeah, this is Joey Zakowski of PG&E. I just had a couple questions, maybe want to get a little more clarity on the expectation for the Qmax and Qmin entries and how they relate to the power factor regulation range up in the generator info section. I think it was like sections the I.14 and I.15. I think you mentioned when you were going through this that was part of the generator specs or nameplate, and I'm having a little bit of difficulty to understand where that number is going to come from, the individual generator power factor regulation range at rated megawatt output.
Yes,
maybe.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just so the Qmax and Qmin that you discussed a couple minutes ago, those need to be consistent. So, like in this field that we're looking at right now, are we entering like if the generator is a 0.9 power factor rating, are you entering negative and positive 0.9, or is it based on the interconnection agreement? Just want to make sure we're consistent and I understand how these numbers relate.
Yeah, so for section 2, the individual generator power factor regulating range is not based on the requirements, it's based on your actual equipment, where your manufacturer spec says that it is capable of.
Okay.
And what you intend to use in operation, that's this section here. So you may have like a 0.87 power factor, but you never use that. So you probably only use a smaller range of that. You have some other limiter, then you put the one that's actually available in the operation. That is the value here. So the section 2, that is design data, it could be broader or wider than you actually use. So we are just checking. So if you say here your Qmax you give us 100 megawatt, we'll check. So if here the manufacturer data only says between the 2 units at most you can have 85 megawatt, then we'll ask you, do you really mean you have 100 megawatt? We'll call that inconsistent data.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand what you said. So if the Qmax, let's say, is, when you're talking, so the Qmax in bars, right? So, and the Qmin is in bars. So we're entering in the reactive element there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if we're calculating based on the rated power factor, that would obviously assign a certain value to the reactive part.
Mm-hmm.
So if the machine is rated for a certain power factor, are you saying that under VI1 and VI2, those values need to be within that rating?
We expect they are within that rating. So if they are not,
okay,
we'll ask the generator why.
Okay, and if they're within that rating but somehow below it, that's acceptable?
That depends on whether it meets the requirement. So we'll also compare this Qmax, Qmin, and with all the other VAR devices and the total reactive capabilities and compare that to the VAR requirement in the GIA. So the different generators have different requirements.
The interconnection agreement?
Yeah, the generator interconnection agreement.
Okay, so, and then where does the Mod 25 verification come into play in that when you guys compare that? Because often the Mod 25 test is completed and, the machine may not have reached its reactive capability and, may not have fully verified the reactive element that we could potentially put out or take in. But that, it sometimes is limited during, certain times when the test is done or certain good conditions. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on how that comparison is done and whether, if there's an inconsistency, is that a problem or is it acceptable if we explain it?
Yeah, you're right. So on the validation tab, I'll talk about later, we also check those capability values against the test report. But that's why we ask the temperature here. So maybe nowadays Qmax, Qmin is at 25 degrees, but the test is performed under 20 degrees or whatever. So there's some engineer judgment there. So that's why we use the word consistent instead of, it has to be the same column also, because the conditions will be different, and we will take into consideration of all the variations, the temperature, but we want to show, like, at least by comparing the two, it doesn't show that this number cannot be achieved. So if we find from the test report, for example, it could be test is performed at a lower temperature and it cannot even achieve this Qmax, Qmin, then we'll definitely see this Qmax, Qmin is wrong. But if it's the other way, the test is performed on the higher temperature and that shows a smaller capability, and then we have to use some judgment. We'll also look at the design data, the section 2 data to make certain, because eventually it is generator's obligation to meet the requirement. We are just trying to help to identify potential issues. But no, we can't 100% identify all the issues. When we see an issue, we'll ask the generator. But if as long as the data are consistent, there's no obvious discrepancy, we'll trust the generator that they will meet the.
Okay, so during the Mod 25 verification, a limitation was reached, and the generator owner explains that limitation. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's so. Even if they explain that why they can't, it's still a deficiency. If they can't meet their requirement, we will work with the generator. The data is accessible, but that's on a different slide. The radio will tell. We call that a quality issue or performance issue that we are going to work with the generator, see what we can do to maybe to help either use control scheme or have something else installed to meet all the requirements in the GIA. But the data are acceptable.
So yeah, to Son's point, you can still comply with this program where you submit your actual physical characteristics, but we will identify that you have not met your power factor requirement, and we will work with you after the fact to see how we can resolve that issue.
Okay, so so I guess I'm trying to understand the Mod 25 test. Are you requiring the Mod 25 test to be done to actually verify what's in the GIA? Because often it's limited, and then in the WEC requirement, if we are limited to some reactive capability, if we don't reach like 50%, we have to do another stage test in 5 years on the 5-year cycle for Mod 25. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand that, how you guys are enforcing that.
We require the test report to be provided as this program. We do not require Mod 25 tests to be done under the condition that can verify the number here. We just require there's no discrepancy between the two. If they are under different conditions, at least in the general direction, they are still okay. They are not directly contradicting each other.
Okay. Thank you.
there any other questions in the queue?
There are no questions in the queue at this time.
Okay, next is transformer data. This data is exactly the same as the entered ISO queue, so nothing different about each transformer. Again, you don't need to repeat the same data if there are multiple transformers. They are identical. Just enter once and put a number of transformers here. That's it. So we should have all of them three-phase transformers, and then based on just 2 winding or 3 winding, you enter either 2 columns or 3 columns data here. But it's just the NVA rating for each winding, and voltage, voltage for each winding, and some impedance information. But toward the end here, we also include geomagnetic disturbance data. So there are certain formulas built in here. We'll look at if the high side voltage level and the high side transformer winding, and is it Y grounded? Then based on the yes and no answer here, if it's yes to both questions, then you should provide the DC resistance of the transformer and the means of resistivity. That's the geomagnetic disturbance data. If it's no, then you don't have to enter those data. Also, we ask if the transformer has a DIC blocking device. If yes, provide the blocking device. Tell us if it's enabled. Then the next section is for the GenTie, the interconnection facility line data. So you only need to enter the data if it's a facility owned by you. You don't need to enter data for facility owned by the PTO. So if a GenTie is actually owned by PTO, you don't need to provide it here. We have the data already. Then for each segment of the GenTie, provide the terminating point from where to where, how long it is, what's the voltage level, what conductor it is, the conductor size, and the ratings, both summer and winter. You can just enter the amp, and we will calculate MVA, then the impedance. So for inverter-based generators, there are collectors. We don't ask for detailed collector data, just provide equivalent collector. So if you model the entire plant as one equivalent generator, then you should have one equivalent collector as well. And just very high level, what's the voltage of that, voltage level of that collector, and then the rating collector, and the impedance data. So that's all for the equipment data. After you finish this, we ask you to do a self-validation. So first, come here, this section on the validation tab, on the top left side. First, make sure you provide all the required information. In column A, select an answer to each checklist item. And did you include a single line diagram? Say yes or no. They all have an NA as an option, but for some of that, it cannot be NA. For the single line diagram, you should always provide a single line diagram. Test report. So test report, if it's not required, then you put not applicable NA there. Power flow model, dynamic model, test report, and Emt model. So select yes, no, or not applicable here. So make sure you submit all the required information to avoid any penalty. Then more detailed validation on the equipment data. So again, answer all the questions, and in column A, select your answer to each question. So first, did you fill out the form completely? So every section that's applicable to your generator technology, please provide the information. Then The reason why is that the equipment data here you enter should be consistent with your single line diagram. So if you show on the this sheet, on the equipment data sheet, your gen time is 2 miles. On the single line diagram, if you show that, then it should be 2 miles. It cannot be 3 miles. Most common mismatch between a single line diagram and the equipment is on the transformer. Make sure if it's delta Y, then it's delta Y on both. Make sure the impedance are same. Don't have 1%, 5% on the equipment data, then 4% on the single line diagram. If you show aux load on your single line diagram, you should, if you do have one, then make sure if you mark that, label that, it's the same megawatt as you provide on the equipment data. And all those things, small things, just pay attention, make sure they are the same. Then your equipment data should be reflected in the power flow model. So all the parameters used in power flow should match what you put on the equipment data tab. Okay, question?
Yeah, I think so. We have a couple of chat questions posted on the chat. And one of this refers to filling out the data sheet and all the different definitions and references we're using there, and how it might be, it probably could be new to certain generators if they have not gone through interconnection request process. And if they're unfamiliar with that, we are using the same data sheet we have used for interconnection requests. So our assumption was that this is something most generators are familiar with. But if you find that there is, you're not sure of a certain definition, you can always reach out to the ISO and the participating TO. These data requests are sent out 6 to 8 months in advance, so that allows everyone sufficient time for such clarification. So at least that's the plan right now. Any questions, definitely send it to us. We usually get back to you in a few days, depending on just how difficult that request is. And the other one was to include the model requirements by adding it to the WEC BPM. I'm assuming that's the WEC Dynamic Model Preparation Manual?
Base case preparation manual?
Yeah.
Not up to us.
So I think we'll take it back and see if how we can formulate a response to that. But this is supposed to be separate from any requirements under WEC or NERC, because these were requirements set under the ISO tariff. So all the requirements are captured in the ISO BPM, and we suggest that everyone just refer to those. It probably might be confusing if we try to mix it with WEC requirements, because these are not the requirements that WEC or NERC is obligating the generators to submit. But if you do have questions in terms of the intersection between WEC requirements and what we are asking, definitely send us questions to grid modeling data. We're more than happy to respond to that. But it might be better if we just take it case by case, given everyone's situation can be a little different.
Looks like there are questions in the queue, so we can address those at this time also.
I am now unmuting our first caller. Caller, please go ahead and state your question for us.
Hello, my name is Ayo with Chevron Pipeline. My question is on the equipment data tab that you showed us, section 8. So I think you mentioned this, but I just wanted to verify. So if that has been pre-populated by you guys, I know earlier you mentioned that we need to validate it. So how do we validate the data if it has been pre-populated by you?
So this data is we will if we know, but I doubt for this will populate a lot because this is owned by the generator. So you just verify that all the data is same as what you have on record. The length of the gen time, the impedance, the ratings. If they are the same as what you have, just leave it alone. If it's different, then change it.
Okay.
Moving on to our next caller. Caller, I'm unmuting your line now. Please go ahead and state your question.
Hi, my name is Divya. I'm from Calpine. I also have a question about the equipment data tab. So in section 2, when you refer to the frequency response group, I'm assuming that's going to the governor settings, right?
Could you say that again? Which one?
So when you're talking about 19, 20, 21, so those are going to have me look at the governor settings, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if and then again going at just taking a look at the power factor, the leading and lagging power factor range. So that is just from the generator data sheet without the OEL and UEL.
Yeah, this can be just from the sheet. Then we will use this as one of the reference data when we evaluate your overall power plant reactive capability.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So now we are going to use this as just one of the reference data when we evaluate your overall power plant reactive capability. We also ask for the Mod 25 test report. We rely more on that test report than this data. This is like the outbound of your capability.
Okay, sounds good. The other question I have is for the transformer section 8, the geomagnetic DC resistance. So in some of the reports, I've seen different resistance values mentioned for the transformer depending on the measured temperature. So do I have to specify here what temperature the value is I'm quoting?
Okay, but let me see. I thought there's no. If you can find the, or maybe you can put as a comment. I think more information is better. We didn't specify that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you so much.
We have no more callers in the queue at this time.
So we'll take up one of the questions that was posted on the chat. So Sonzu, this is regarding the maximum plant output megawatt for the generator.
Okay.
So if you can scroll up.
This?
Yeah, so the maximum plant output for the generator, the question is, are they expected to put in the megawatt value that corresponds to unity power factor? Or what power factor range are they expected to be at to put this value in?
We are asking for megawatt. So actually, if the generator usually is operating at a unity power factor, it's okay. But usually we are not expecting to be at unity power factor because most of the generator we do require dynamic one. Yeah. So that is it should be at your operating power factor. So it depends if it's old solar PV plant in SCE or San Diego area, they are required to operate at unity power factor, then yeah, use the unity power factor. But for single generators, you don't operate at unity power factor, so don't use the unity power factor. So continue with the validation tab. So equipment data should be consistent with the power factor talk-through model and the dynamic model. So this means if you say that the generator has the primary frequency response, then your dynamic model should reflect that. The test report for this is just to check your test report for the capability. Basically, Mod 25 test should be less than 5 years old. and the test report for dynamic model should be less than 10-year-old. Now here, this one, the real and the reactive capability in the powerful model supported by the capability test report. So this is the question we just discussed earlier. As long as the test report does not contradict the Qmax, Qmin you provided in the EPC model, as well as on the equipment data, it's okay. We understand the test may be performed on certain conditions that's different from what you, that doesn't cover all the operating conditions basically. So we are not asking this to be exactly the same, it just it can be supported by your test report. There are all necessary models included in dynamic model file. So based on the equipment data, we already asked you all the models that should be in the DYD, and then you should provide all those models in the DYD file. And we require that you test your dynamic model, it initializes without error, and we ask you to run 10 seconds no disturbance simulation at full real power output. And we should see a spread of active TG and QG less than either it should be 1 megavar or 1%. And all those we consider as objective test. So those validation, it must be yes or not applicable. There isn't anything not applicable, I think. So basically the yes should be yes to avoid any penalty. Then we have more reviews on the performance. So we'll check so you pass the basic test, so if answer to all those are yes, basically the models are okay, are acceptable. But then we'll see whether you meet all kinds of reliability requirements and interconnection requirements. We'll check the parameters in your dynamic model. Are they in a reasonable range? If they meet the requirement of applicable standards, we will check what's your reactive, in the transient, what's your voltage control mode. You still use constant power factor mode even when voltage is below 0.9, so during a transient, we will contact you and try to resolve those with you. That's an example of this check. Then another thing is all voltage control devices properly coordinated in the power flow model, no harm. So what we see is because there are multiple devices that they all control voltage. You have generators, have SVD, and even the transformer. We have seen that how you set the regulated bus. So sometimes if you didn't do a good job, you will see we have seen that generator control a remote bus, but actually the SVD is controlling a generator bus. They all fight each other, and the voltage is sometimes it causes the solution very difficult to reach. So if we notice those, we will let you know. Then like this voltage control consistency between power flow model and dynamic model. It's okay if you have a power flow model. It is you have a smaller Q range, Qmax, Qmin, but in a dynamic it is wider. That is reasonable. But if it's the other way, in the power flow you have a wide Qmax, Qmin, but in the dynamic your Qmax, Qmin is a smaller range, then we will make a note of that. The dynamic range should be wider than the steady state range. So things like that we'll report. And does the generator meet its reactive capability requirement? So this requirement is different for different generators. We'll use all the information you provide, the design data, the Qmax, Qmin, the VAR devices, the Mod 25 test report to do overall evaluation to see if it meets the requirements. in the generator interconnection agreement. And that's the protection settings meet the interconnection requirement. So these include the write-through, like frequency write-through, the voltage write-through, the base load flag that's corrected in the power flow model. So base load flag, we mentioned this particularly here because base load flag has an impact on the governor, the post-transient, as well as the transient simulation. So we want to make sure base load flag is set properly in the power flow. Yeah, so base load 0 means megawatt can be adjusted both upward and downward in the post-transient for a generation generation load balance change. It's 1 means it's blocked from upward regulation, and if it's 2, then it's blocked in both directions. So if EMT models are required, we'll benchmark between the EMT simulation and transient simulation. They won't be the same, but we want to see at least a consistent response. If we see something quite different, inconsistent, then we will let you know here. So those are all more on the performance of the models. And when so you submit that by checking each of those and answer. So this part you don't need to answer, we will in review. But for this part you need to answer yes to each question. You submit it to us, we will review, then we'll put our comments on the right side on column I. We may say things that you don't say, so for each particular one, if we put a no, we will explain why we say no here. So you have a detailed explanation of our comments, then we will also summarize our comments on the right side of this tab, telling you overall your submission is compliant or deficient. So that's all about the submission.
Just one thing I wanted to add, as Sandra mentioned, if we say no or yes, we will include our comments on the left-hand side. Sometimes you may see certain sometimes the detailed comments actually are on the right hand, so there might be a slight variation, but definitely check both columns. But the detailed comments if the detailed comments are on the right side, they will refer to the specific data points that we are calling out as a deficiency. So you might see some variation there, but the amount of response we are providing to you is the same. So if it's done a little differently, don't think that there was something wrong with your project. It's just different.
Everybody has a personal style. Another thing I want to add is, so you submit this. So we want to use just one form back and forth. We give you a pre-populated spreadsheet. You work directly on that spreadsheet, send back to us. We will put our comments, review comments, send to you, and you work on that spreadsheet. You can rename it, but keep everything we already provide to you in that. So all our comments shows here when you submit your Cure submission to us. And also, when you submit your Cure submission, we prefer you address each comment here. Either put in here directly under our comment, put your response, and also put a summary here. This really helps us to identify whether you have cured deficiency. Otherwise, we have to chase the whole thing again from scratch to see what you entered, redo the entire validation. That's very time consuming.
We do have a few questions in the queue, so we'll address those now.
Moving to our first caller in the queue. Your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your question.
Yes, under the equipment tab, the discussion that we had a minute ago about it, I have a question under the plant megawatts. We do have a synchronous generator that does operate very near unity power factor. That's how it's dispatched by the transmission operator. And during high flow conditions, it's a hydro unit. In the springtime, we go to 54 megawatts on a 55 MVA machine. So is it appropriate to put 54 megawatts on there, even though the rated is 46.75 and an 8.5 power factor?
Yeah, 54 is fine.
Okay, so the 54 would be an appropriate value there.
Operation.
Okay, we got flagged as a deficiency by doing that.
So eventually what's binding is the megawatt at the POI. So depending on the operating condition on your side, it could vary a little bit because of the losses. But I wouldn't expect that losses change a lot just because of different wear off, but it could change a little bit. So as long as it all matches, well, EPC file shows the same thing, that should be fine.
Well, that was what we were flagged on, as I gave the 54 megawatts as being the total gross output, the maximum total gross output of the generator, and it's a 0.8 power factor, so the reactive capability at rated is quite a bit greater, but it's actually unachievable because the unit has an old amplitude excitation system, and it goes unstable. Yeah.
Tom, I know we received this question from you in writing as well. So, I think we're all speaking we are generally here, but we will respond to your questions in writing with more detail.
Yeah.
So that'll be easier for us to do.
Yeah, there are some particulars that vary between the projects.
Okay, no problem. I didn't know if this was the right forum to bring that up or not, but that's fine.
But thank you for flagging that. We are reviewing it, and I know you sent it to us, so we'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Moving on to our next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your question.
Yes, Sanji, thank you for the presentation and the information. This is Mark Robinson with AES. I was curious if a particular unit does not meet the net capacity factor in Mod 26 and 27, and therefore we don't have a test report, or didn't have to go through that testing. Should we just indicate as much in the comment section, or that's the reason why we don't have that information?
I think if we say you should provide a test report, then you should do the test.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Mark, are you saying that your unit was not large enough to qualify as NERC EES or to qualify for Mod 26 and 27 testing?
No, so in Mod 26 and 27, the net capacity factor, the 5% net capacity factor over the last 3 years, if it doesn't meet that threshold, then it under that exception you don't have to verify the model and under requirement 2. So we have a couple of units where that's the case, where the units are not run that often and therefore don't meet that 5% threshold.
Can you send that to us in writing and reference the specific units you're talking about? We can respond to it.
We'll take a look. Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any other questions in the queue?
Moving on to our next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead and state your question.
I actually have 2 questions. One is regarding the comment period. When an equipment data sheet may be returned to the GO. I just want to make sure I'm clear. The expectation for response would be to provide details in either the equipment data validation section or the comment section, or do you want both?
We definitely want your detailed response in the left-hand column, so under the validation tab. Yeah, so that's, under the validation tab, definitely put your detailed comments for each question. And then on the right side, just provide a summary. That is fine.
we're flexible. As long as we can understand what you mean, it should be fine.
As long as we can, understand and relate it to which data point you're referring to, that's fine with us.
Okay, great. And then back to the equipment data tab for my second question, please. Actually, it's just kind of a more general statement on the last gentleman that was speaking. In regards to like the Mod 2627 test, if a unit's not required under the Mod 2627 requirements, does a dynamic test have to be completed for this data response?
So your question is emphasizing that it doesn't meet the BS definition under Mod 2627, so it doesn't have to be compliant with 2627 at all, right? I think ours is more stringent.
Yeah. So that's okay. This is the end. Answer was responding. Yes. So if you have identified it for you, you do have to still complete the test, even if you weren't qualified as null PS or those requirements weren't applicable to you before. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was clear based on kind of the answer to the last question that he asked. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you.
Are there any more questions in the queue?
We have one last caller at this time. Caller, I'm unmuting your line. Please go ahead.
Hi, I have a question on the equipment data tab, section 2.14. So that field limits, so the value in there can only be between 0 and -1. And but I'm guessing, I thought that the data is in that field should be based on the capability curve. So if per the capability curve, the power factor regulation range, the leading power factor is -1, what should we do?
You can either clear the data validation or put some, another way is, so this spreadsheet is not locked. You can make all the modifications. So actually those cells with validation, you can go to the data validation and you can remove the validation rule. Or another thing, should I tell you this trick? If you do copy paste, all the validation is bypassed. So if you enter -1 somewhere else, then copy paste into that cell, it will be accepted.
Okay. So am I correct that 2.14 is based on the capability curve?
No, actually it's not.
Okay.
This is the -1 means there's no, that's unity power factor, right? Yeah, but if it's unity power factor, probably your test report and manufacturer data will be the same. So this meant to enter your manufacturer data sheet data, manufacturer specification data. What the when the equipment comes out of factory, what the manufacturer says it's capable of.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
We have no more questions in the queue.
Okay.
I think with that we have wrapped up our discussion on the generator data template, and so as we just want to highlight that always send your questions in time so that we have some time and opportunity to respond back to you before your submission deadline is due. If you're making submissions and you need to make notes, definitely put it in the validation tab in as much detail as you can. It is really helpful to our engineers to review it. And yeah, we just appreciate all your support and cooperation in that. If there are no more questions on the generator data template, I think we can move on with this presentation. So if you want to switch back to the...
Oh, it looks like a question just came in the queue, so I can address that now.
I'm muting our new caller. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, Hi, I just had a quick question. Regarding consistency between like the equipment data and the single line diagram, that's under the equipment data validation tab. If the generator notes an inconsistency and they're addressing it and there's a plan to address it, is that sufficient, or is there a requirement to solve the deficiency in a period of time required? Typically our normal process is we have a drawing update process that we follow internally, so that's what we're utilizing to fix that issue. So I just wanted to get some clarity on the requirements behind that from ISO's end. Thank you.
Sorry, can you please identify yourself?
Joe Zakowski, PG&E.
Okay. So that's a good question. I don't think we have really answered that before. We would prefer to resolve that while the submission review process is going on, because that's what our requirement was. There might be some differences that we could take into consideration case by case, and I think we'll just have to deal with it at that point. So, to summarize, preference is resolve everything, resolve all your inconsistencies while we're in the review process. But if there are some special considerations which prevents generator owners from doing that, we can discuss it during your data validation process. So I don't really have a strong recommendation in general on that.
Okay, thank you.
That was our last caller.
Okay, and we'll bring back the presentation.
So our next slide takes are going to be on the Emt module submission, and Onzu and we'll still be going through that. I just want to mention that we will go through the data request, review, and submission process after towards the end of the presentation, where we deal with more of the administrative items. So yeah, that will be coming up. So if you have any questions, we can definitely address it there.
Okay, so due to the traditional SSR issue, and also because of the increased penetration of inverter-based generation, so the EMT models are now become more and more important to the planning studies. So we do require EMT models to be submitted for all the generators close to series compensated transmission line. And last year, the PTO and ISO jointly developed and posted some guidelines for the submitting EMT models. They are on the ISO website. There are two documents there. One is the first one that was developed was for inverter-based generators, and later on we received a lot of questions on the synchronous generator as well, also on induction machines for the turbine. So we posted a second document that covers both synchronous generator, induction generator, and inverter-based. So both are available on the ISO website. If you are inverter-based, you can use either one. If you are the other type of generators, you use the most one. It has a pretty detailed requirements on how you submit the EMT model. For example, what function compiler it has to be compatible, and all those requirements, we can find the details from those. Another thing to mention is those EMT models are typically submitted as a black box model. It's provided mostly by the manufacturer. So some OEMs require execution of NDAs for the ISO and the PTOs to use those models. So please contact us as soon as possible if you know that NDA is required, so we can establish that NDA on time. Also, another big question is the generators. It takes quite some time to develop the EMT model, so the generators want to know far in advance whether the EMT model is required. So ISO is going to post a list of generators required to submit EMT model. So even if you are in a much later phase, you will know soon that maybe February, right? The plan is supposed in February. In February, you will know if you need to submit EMT model, so you can start early. Next page. mentioned generating facilities electrically close to series compensator line are required to provide EMT model. Electrically close, what it means after, for example, 6 switching actions, this generator can be reduced to a series compensator transmission line, then it is required to provide the EMT model. So that's the criteria. Each PTO will have 6 specific examples, and depending on the PTO areas, they have different criteria. Also, we have noticed that Type 1 and Type 2 for wind turbines, it's very difficult for them to, those are legacy technology, it's very difficult for them to get EMT model, and so they are exempt from EMT modeling requirement. Okay, so next page. So for synchronous generators or induction generators, we need a multi-mass torsional shaft interface model, and representation of machine saturation or magnetizing curve and transformer magnetizing curve. You need to represent the exciter, the governor, the PSS. You can use either use a user-written PSCAD model, or you can use the standard PSCAD block models to set the parameters for those. Both are accessible. And then you should represent the generator grounding and the protection system. Next page. So for inverter-based generator, you should include the full detailed in-node control loops of the power electronics. Should include all the fast in-node controls as implemented in the plant. So this is the kind of the difference between the EMT model and the positive sequence. The positive sequence model, the one we use for the regular transient simulation, doesn't have those fast in-node controls. Also, we do require that it's not just for the inverters, it should represent all plant-level controllers. It should represent the generator protection system, all the reactive devices. Next. Okay. Yeah, so let's go back to the, any questions on EMT model submission? Are there any questions in the queue?
We have no questions at this time.
All right, so I think we are done with most of the technical part of the presentation now. We did, and if you have any more questions on the EMT models and such, please forward it to grid modeling data. Our engineers and the PTO engineers can definitely respond to you on that. We put together a quick list of frequently asked questions, so just highlight, and this is just highlighting again some of the things we've discussed already. As we said before, generators do not need to submit equipment data information for facilities that are owned by the participating transmission owner. So that's not for you to fill up. You just need to submit data for your own facilities. If you do not have original equipment manufacturer data, then you can use performance testing of your units to modify the generic WEC models and submit it to us. If that is the issue you're facing, let us know and we can work with you on a plan for that. For generators that are going online right now, we will have the same obligations and requirements for you, and we covered the process for that later on. But for you to submit the test reports, we do allow you to some additional time over those generators that are already existing and operational. But before you can get your test reports done, you're still required to submit your EPC and DYD files and your equipment data sheets based on the as-built information you have. So even if you need to submit your test reports later, you still need to meet the other requirements beforehand based on the timelines you provided. Then the last point was something we have responded a few times, is that if your protection settings are not reflected in dynamic models that are available in the WEC library, you still need to provide the protection settings to us and identify that, and then we can confirm that whether or not any dynamic, so they need to be reflected in the dynamic models or not. Right. if there are no more questions on the technical information to be provided, we can give a quick overview of the data request, review, and submission process. The process has remained generally the same over the past year since we have been implementing it. We split out all the participating generators into different categories. There are a total of 5 categories and 11 phases. The categories are set by nameplate rating and voltage, and we do have a table showcasing how those categories are set up. Before each phase, we will send out a request letter to the generator, and we will attach a data sheet as well as the existing EPC and DOID files to that request. The data sheet will identify all the submission requirements for you, and it may have some data already pre-populated by the PTO and ISO based on what information we have on our hand. That will be sent, as we said, 6 to 8 months before. Use the data template to respond to us. Everything that you need to provide has to go into the data template, and then provide all the supplemental documentation separately. If possible, not send it in zip files. We have had some problems receiving that on our side, but if the files are too big and it cannot be sent without zip, let us know and we can work something out with you. For new generators that are going online as we proceed with this program, request process is still the same. We will send you the request after you have achieved your commercial operation date as declared by the PTO and the ISO. We will send you the same kind of letter as well as the data sheet and the PSLF models. You have 120 days to submit your as-built information to us, but for the test reports, you have 365 days. And that will be identified in your letter as well. Just giving a quick overview of the generator category list. It is posted on our website. It covers all the generators that we have that were existing prior to September 1st, 2018. It lays out the categories for them and the phases. And so you can always go and look up and see which phase or category your generator is in. The details of the data requirements and the actual dates of the submission deadline are again covered in Section 10 of the BPM for transmission planning process. This is an overview of the different categories and the nameplate and voltage that we used to determine these categories. For every generator, we look at the nameplate information we have on file as well as the interconnection voltage. If you believe that we have miscategorized you, and probably because it might be because of wrong information we have, please reach out to us and we can work with you on that. The submission process. We're tracking a lot of generator submissions at this point. It is very helpful if you follow our instructions on how you should submit. Basic information that we need is, please provide your resource ID in the subject line as well as the name of your generator and include BPM model submission. This allows us to automatically filter all these emails to the appropriate inboxes where we track it. All responses should be sent to grid modeling data. You need to CC the interconnecting PTO as well as your scheduling coordinator in your submission, and those instructions are provided in the letter we send you, but this is just a reminder. Just an example of a submission format. As you can see, put in your resource ID, generator name, and BPM model submission in the subject line. Recipients, we did put in just the ISO and the PTO email, and in this case we use PG&E, but replace it with your interconnecting PTO. Also include the scheduling coordinator in there. As probably everyone knows, non-compliance with this program does lead to sanctions under the ISO tariff, and those sanctions are passed through the scheduling coordinator, so we did put it in our BPM that they would at least be apprised of all the data exchanges between the ISO and the generator and the generators themselves. The SCs are not responsible for any data submissions, but they are just included as a CC. So do not be surprised if the ISO also CCs them in our responses to you. As for attachments, attach your data request template and any other supplemental information we have asked, your model files, your test reports, your EMT models, single line, and anything else that you would like us to look at in order to complete our review. All right. Finally, we did want to add this as a separate slide because we have been including these specific comments in some of our more recent reviews. The criteria in general, the criteria we use to see whether you're compliant or non-compliant is whether all the data you have submitted to us is complete, so you have filled out all the data requirements, and whether they're consistent between the different documents and data points you provided. If you meet both those requirements, generally you may find yourself being compliant with this program. There might be some exceptions, but in general, if you complete all your data requirements and are consistent between all your data submission points, you should be compliant. Outside of that, as Sanzu was mentioning before, we do perform quality checks on the data submitted. This is to ensure you're complying with the applicable interconnection requirements or with any NERC or WEC standards that you're subject to, and also check whether the models you submitted don't have any performance issues, as in probably providing oscillations or stability issues in our model runs. These are not going to be penalized under this program. This will also not deem you non-compliant in this program. You can be compliant with this program and still have these issues. We will identify them separately when we respond to you, and then we will work on a plan to remedy those issues. And we will do this after the final reviews have been done. If they can be corrected while we are reviewing your data, that is fine and good. Otherwise, we'll work with you after the fact. If you have any questions on these specific deficiencies, definitely contact us and the interconnecting PTO. Same place to grid modeling data and include the same subject line identifiers. It's really helpful to us if you do that. This is just the criteria we use to determine whether you're compliant or not. As we said, if you're incomplete or inconsistent, it will lead to deficiencies and ultimately non-compliance. This just lays out the general factors we use to determine your compliance. If you have any questions regarding your deficiencies or non-compliance, please send them in writing first. It's very useful for us and our engineers to review those questions before we can respond back to you. We'll be happy to jump on a call with you, but we do want the questions in writing beforehand. It helps us for tracking and helps us give you a more complete response. Validation and cure period. Once you have submitted the data, the ISO and the PTOs will review your data and respond to you 90 days from the date of submission. That's the timeline we're generally sticking to. We do have a lot of submissions coming in, so there might be minor delays, and if you have any issues with that, definitely let us know. Once we send you a list of deficiencies, you have 60 days to respond to us with a complete package of complete data package resolving all those deficiencies. In those 60 days, if you have any questions, send it our way and we will try to respond to you as quickly as possible so you're still able to meet the deadline. If you want to run a draft submission by us to make sure you have a complete submission, please send that to us at least a couple of weeks or more before your deadline. This gives us at least time to do a quick check to ensure that we're getting the data we need. If you do not cure the deficiencies identified, either by not curing them in the data package you have provided or missing the submission deadline, this will lead to penalties under the ISO tariff section 37.6. I think it should be 1.2. That might be an error there. And the final one is we have just posted some helpful links for you. The BPM for transmission planning process. It's posted on our website, updated as we go. We also have a separate section where we post all the associated documents and requirements for this program. It is on the transmission planning page, and we provided just some details to help you identify that specific subsection. If you have problems locating that, let us know and we'll help you out. Again, any other questions you have, send it to Grid Modeling Data with BPM Model Submission in the subject line, and we will work on responding to you. Some helpful links. We have provided the mailbox addresses of the PTOs you will be receiving requests from. There might be more PTOs coming up as more generators go online, but right now these are the PTOs that are participating in this program.
Before we wrap up the call today, are there any other questions?
The queue is currently empty at this time.
Okay. Then with that, that concludes today's call. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.